Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our council meeting tonight. I'd first of all like to start off by thanking Councillor Peters for filling in for me last week, and I gave me a chance to be home with Stephanie as she got home from the hospital. So thank you all for helping in all of our times in the last month. We'll move forward with, are there any expressions of interest? Seeing none, we'll move on to minutes.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have motion that the minutes of the meetings held on October the 15th, 2024 be confirmed. Moved by Councillor Peters, seconded by Councillor Clark.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Carried.
Council will now resolve itself into committee of the whole to deal with following business. First item under strategic direction is Ontario Works discretionary benefits. I have a motion that report SESS 1324 relating to Ontario Works discretionary benefits be received for information. Moved by Councillor Wookey, seconded by Councillor Baldwin-Sands.
Questions or comments? Jim? Councillor Herbert, sorry.
Thank you, Worship. On the discretionary benefits, I was kind of surprised to see that nothing has changed since 2013. Is this something you have to apply for every year and it doesn't change or automatically comes to you? I mean, that's a long time because things have certainly changed in 12 years. And I can see the three things that you cover: the funerals, the vision, and the dental. And when we're talking about those three services plus that hasn't changed, do the people who are involved in these, the ODSP, do they have to apply to have this done? Or is it something you bring somebody in and say, hey, what do you need? Do you need this or for dental and vision? But anyway, I'm more concerned about it hasn't changed in 2013, so I don't know what you can do about it. So anyway, thank you.
Yeah, the rates haven't
Please.
changed since 2013. That's set by the ministry and it's province-wide. So it's $10 per case per family. So for example, if you had a family of 4, we would get $10 for that person, that family per month. So $120 in the year. So you can see it's hard to stretch that money out around that many people. We tell people if they have an emergency dental situation, they can contact us. For example, if someone passes away, we don't go out and solicit looking for people who need the benefit, but if it's mentioned that they need it, we are there to support it.
Go ahead, Jim.
Thank you, supplement. Thank you. So why hasn't it changed? Tell me why it hasn't changed. I mean, life has changed in 13 years, 12 years. Anyway, why does it not change?
They haven't asked my opinion at the ministry, so I really don't know why they haven't changed it. I mean, it should be changed. Everything goes up in price, so we're losing money every year on it because the prices are going up. I can't have an answer to you why the ministry hasn't changed those rates.
Thank you. So you don't even apply for it, it just comes?
Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you.
Councillor Kohler.
Thanks, Your Worship. I know myself and Councillor Baldwin-Sands have had some conversations with some of the dentists around Dr. Haruta, the president of the association for one. And I know that they're quite concerned, and some of the things that they brought forward to us, it made me quite concerned too, because I'm worried that the way the funding goes, and I know there's only a certain pot and it's all divided up amongst those, but I'm just worried with some of the rates that we've set, because it is a discretionary funding, and maybe you can speak to that as to why we have the rates that we do for the dental. And I guess it's because some other pots maybe are more used or not, because there is some pretty big discrepancies between what we fund for dental versus other municipalities. And when you look at the dentist overheads, many of them have stopped seeing OW people because they just can't afford to see them anymore because they're subsidizing that much. And my fear is that if we continue with these type of rates, is that there might not be any service for these people at all because the dentist just can't afford to see them. So I don't know if you have any comments on that or not.
Yeah, the rates are the same rates that Ontario Disability Support Program pays for all their clients. So we stay consistent with that program. As far as the dentists, so far we've been fortunate. The dental offices, some dental offices will only see up to a certain amount of clients in a year. We've always been successful in trying to find a dentist that will service our clients, which is great. As far as the rates, other municipalities, they may be asking their council for more money to top up the money that they have. We've never asked for additional funds for discretionary benefits. Occasionally, like last year, we were $24,000 over. But we found that elsewhere in our budget because we really don't know. I mean, we don't know how many funerals there's going to be. We can estimate, but it's an estimate. So, yeah.
Councillor Foley?
Okay, maybe my assumption was wrong, and maybe you can clarify this. So when London is funding, say, $101 for an extraction and St. Thomas funds $38, that funding would be additionally asked for from the council that isn't from that same pot of money from the province and just divvied up differently. They're actually maybe, and I don't know, maybe we could have some sort of comparison on that. I just assumed that they were dividing that money up differently and providing a little bit more money for that. But then again, at what cost, from what other program are they taking that? But maybe that's what London is doing and topping that up from the $38 to the 101. Do you know if that's what's happening there?
I don't know the answer to that. We can certainly look into a bit more to find out who is doing what and which municipalities have council putting more money towards it. The tricky part is if we stay with what we have, then we have to cut back on some kind of service. And we hear from all the healthcare providers that it's not enough. So the optometrists, for example, we hear that from them as well. The majority of what we do is dental and dentures, vision, and the funerals and burials. That takes the biggest amount, but we also do cover some other health items as well. And all the clinics are requesting additional funds. So it's a balancing act. So if we give more to the dental, then unless we have more dollars, then we have to cut back somewhere else. So that's where we have.
Yeah, and I know from past dealings too, we had conversations with the funeral directors from not being enough money as well too. But if, and I don't think it needs to be a report, but if there could be some clarification whether that money is being topped up from the municipality or just divided up, I know I'd appreciate that. But.
Councillor Clark?
Thanks. It mentions that on the average, you're helping out about 160 unique clients in a year. I was just wondering, from year to year, are you seeing a rollover? Is it 160 new clients, or is there a number of people that are in such desperate shape that they need help each year?
There's not a lot of rollover. I mean, there's some. We only do dentures every 5 years. We'll replace dentures, eyeglasses every 3 years. We just do it for adults, so children are paid through the ministry. Obviously funerals and burials, it's once. So there is some repetition, but we really give wide guidelines to as far as the period of time. So you can't get glasses every year, for example, every 3 years. And you can't get so we try really hard to spread it out as much as we can, basically.
Further, Councillor Peters, please.
Thanks very much, Worship. Question on the funerals and burials. How successful are we at making recoveries? We're just
Over the amount?
curious.
Yeah. I don't have exact numbers for you, but now with the death benefit, the Canada Pension Plan death benefit, we apply for any income, any money that's owing to that person. So we would take, if there's any money in their bank account, for example, we send letters to the banks to try to obtain that money, and that would be applied towards the funeral costs. And we also, for Canada Pension Plan disability, there's rarely anything else that we can collect money back from. The one thing I did omit that we have another 14 plus funerals that weren't OW and ODSP, and I didn't put that on the report. So we have additional 14 that are for low income people. So we do try to collect back. I couldn't give you the exact numbers, but with the CPP death benefits definitely helps a lot. But not everyone is eligible for CPP death benefits. So.
Further questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor of the report? Any opposed? Carried. Thank you so much for a very detailed report.
Next item relates to the Sandy Mount Development Area Official Plan and Zoning Bylaw Amendments. I have a motion that report PD 2824 relating to the Sandy Mount Area Official Plan and Zoning Bylaw Amendments be received for information. Moved by Councillor McCauley, seconded by Councillor Herbert.
Questions or comments? Councillor Peters?
Thanks very much, Your Worship, to Jim or Lou. One of the things that came up at the public meeting, and then I had some emails afterwards, and it's regarding the new intersection that is going to be created at Wellington Road. At what point will we have further discussion, or will we even, because that's, well, maybe it is in the city there, but it's sort of borderline between Central Elgin and St. Thomas, right at that point. And there was some concern expressed about that intersection. And, you know, if you drive it, if you're heading towards London and Wellington Road, you are going up a hill, you're going around a curve. When will the discussion happen as to what the details of that intersection look like?
Mr. McComb, welcome tonight.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Councillor Peters. The details, that's perhaps something that the Director of Environmental Services can answer with respect to when they'll get around to those specific details on the intersection. I can tell you that, yes, we are in an area where there's multiple jurisdictions, and we have initiated some conversations with our neighboring municipal partners about how to improve overall connectivity for both vehicular traffic and for active transportation. We can control with the developer everything within the bounds of their subdivision, but we also have to have some further discussions about how to improve that overall connectivity in that area and get people from Sandy Mount into the balance of the city via various means of transportation. Perhaps the Director could answer questions about that intersection itself.
All right. Good tag team. Mr. Delivic?
Through the mayor to Councillor Peters. So the development provided a traffic impact study. And through that traffic impact study, I'd identified some roadway improvements, which included a dedicated left turning lane for the northbound traffic on Wellington in order to get into the Sandy Mount subdivision, as well as requiring the same left-hand turning movement from those leaving the Sandy Mount subdivision looking to get onto Wellington. So those pieces, those detailed pieces were included as part of the detailed design package when the application was first submitted.
So there's no supplementary, Your Worship, there's no warrants that are being met that would require signalization at that intersection?
Not at this time. I can go back. I haven't reviewed that TIS in a little while, but I can go back and look to see if there's a trigger mechanism that would require that or not, to make sure that we cover those bases.
Further questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Carried.
Next item is notice of a public meeting to take place on Zoom on October the 24th, 2024 at 10 a.m. from the Committee of Adjustment regarding an application for consent by Sophie Choi to create a 1.25 meter by 8.347 meter easement over part of 44 William Street for parking ingress egress purposes in benefit of 42 William Street. Your Worship, unless the members have any further items for this committee, we'll now move into community engagement and services. Nothing currently on the agenda unless there are any items from the members. Your Worship, seeing none, we'll now move into infrastructure and civic operations. Nothing noted on the agenda unless there are any items from the members. Seeing none, we'll now move into corporate governance and administration. First item relates to the 2023 audited consolidated financial statements. We do have Christine Scrimger here to present the draft 2023 audited consolidated financial statements.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I believe in your packages, you have the draft financial statements for both the consolidated City of St. Thomas financial statement as well as the trust funds. And I'll go through them in that order. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to stop me and ask me, and we'll hopefully be able to answer those questions. Excuse me. A couple things I want to bring to your attention before we get started. So in 2023, there's new accounting standard called asset retirement obligation. So what this is we're looking at our tangible capital assets and seeing if when they are retired, meaning they are no longer in use, if there's any kind of contamination that would require remediation at that point. And what happens is we look at those amounts and we present value them into today's dollars. So let's say we're going to do it in 2040, we would bring that amount back into what it would be worth today's dollars. And we're setting that up as a liability. What that means is in the future, we will have to raise the monies to do that work in those years. And so that's the first thing that you'll notice in these financial statements. I'll comment on also the consolidation is fairly complex. So it includes your own boards, which would be the DDB, the library board, the secondary water system, and the EDC, as well as our proportionate share of the Elgin area primary water system, as well as the health unit, and then as well your share of Integris. So all of those items show up in these financial statements. And the last thing, because we do consolidate the health unit, there is a new statement on these financial statements. The health unit used what's called a derivative, which is really just a hedge towards their debt, trying to hedge against interest rate fluctuations. And because of that, there's a new statement on here that just relates really to the health unit. It has no impact on your general taxes. So having said all that, I'll go through the financial statements now. We have an independent auditor's report, which is a clean audit opinion dated as of today's date, which hopefully is the date council, as under the Canadian audit standards, approves these financial statements, and then they can be finalized and we can get the FIR filed with the province. So we'll go forward to the numbers. Thank you for this. If you just come back down just a little bit, thanks, Dan. Just down a little bit to the net financials. So when I look at these statements, there's a few things that I look at to judge your sort of stability and where you're at. So the net financial assets, which is the line just after, it's 22 million this year, 14 million last year. So that's an increase. That's what would be in your bank at the end of the day. If everybody paid you what they owed you and you paid off all your debt, obviously you would not be paying all your long-term debt in one foul swoop, but that's a big increase from last year, about $8 million, which is significant. And when we get to the reserves, I'll mention what that is made up of, but the majority of that has been moved over to reserves. Everything below that line are assets you need to have in place in order to provide the services that you do. So your roads, your wastewater, water systems. And you'll see there that we have had a significant increase there. 715 million this year versus 561 million last year. The majority of that is in work in progress, which are three major projects there. One is Yarmouth Yards. One is the servicing at the Northwest sanitary sewer servicing, and then also childcare facilities. So those are the three major items that are in work in progress. You'll also notice tangible capital assets have increased significantly, and that's after amortization of just over 17 million. So those are all indicators that you're reinvesting in capital. And as you note, under net long-term liabilities, there's no new debt that was issued in the year. So that's another indicator that I'm looking at to make sure that your financing is in place. Coming down, the accumulated surplus of 738 million this year versus 576 million last year. And we'll get to the reasons for that and when we get to the surplus note. The next statement is your statement of operations. So this shows your budget for 2023 versus your actual for 2023, and then the actual for 2022. You'll notice under the 22 column, there is a note number 2, which is where that asset retirement obligation, we went back and had to treat it retrospectively, so which means you go back to the first year that the financial statements are presented. So we had to go back to 2022 and restate those for that new pickup of that liability. I'll remind council that in the budget for 2023, we do not budget for those consolidated entities being the health unit, Integris, and the Elgin area water system. And we do not budget for amortization. So keep that in mind as I go through these, because that really is the reason between the actual and the budget. Under revenue, the 158 million budget versus 170 million actual. There's really two reasons for that. One is the childcare new funding. I call it CWELC, CWELC, couple different acronyms, but it was about 4.5 million. And then in addition, we've picked up the health unit in the government grants. As you can imagine, most of their funding is health, Ministry of Health funding under government grants, and our proportionate share of those was about $6 million. So that's, if you add those two amounts together, that's the difference between your budget and actual, and add in the investment income increase as well, which as we all know, the interest rates in 2022 were approximately 1% and significantly higher in 2023. And so we were able to increase our investment income, not knowing at the time we did the budget for 2023. Under expenditures, so that $6 million that's in revenue that I mentioned on those consolidated entities is also in expenses in the actuals, and then as well the 17 million of amortization. So if you add those two together, it's 23 million, and that's basically what the difference between the total budgeted expenditures and the actual expenditures are. Coming down, and then this line, this excess of revenue or expenditures, last year you see it was just in a small deficit, which really to me is a break even on 159 million of revenue. This year we've increased that position as well. And what that means is that your tax rates are covering your costs, your operating costs, as well as that amortization, which is the using up of capital assets. So again, an increase there. Under the belief that the other revenue expenditure, all items that relate either to capital or to those consolidated entities, which again change significantly from year to year depending on the level of capital that's happening. Coming down, and there's 159 million there of other revenue. Coming down to your excess of revenue over expenditures, and you can see the majority of that is in the capital area, so that's just the reinvestment in tangible capital assets. Coming down to that ending surplus that you saw on the balance sheet of 738 million. Any questions on that at all? I know I go through this fairly quickly, but I know you've. All right, I will go through the rest of these. So the next statement is a statement of remeasurement gains and losses, and this is just on those derivatives. This is this new statement that I mentioned. So what this basically means is that your share of what the health unit would owe at the end of the year is $73,000. So not significant in the overall financial statement piece. The next statement is your consolidated statement of cash flows. This is your non-cash items on the balance sheet, the increases and decreases. And if you look down, these large numbers are almost all related to, well, they are all related to capital. So there's the amortization that I've been talking about of 17 million. And then acquisition of new assets, 41 million. And then the increase in the WIP, work in progress, of 131 million. And again, under financing activities is where we see that there was no new debt issued. It was all repayments of debt. So 2.8 million, almost $3 million of repayment of debt. Coming down to that cash balance that shows up on your balance sheet of 65 million. The next statement is sort of zeroes in on the net financial assets, again, the capital assets. So this is really, again, a regurgitation of what I've said already, so I won't spend any time on this unless there's any questions. And then we'll get to the notes to the financial statements. These notes are standard. These are very similar to what you've seen in the past. Note number 2 basically explains that whole change in the county policies for asset retirement obligation. And the note that I think council would be most interested in is note number 11, if you'd like to turn to that. This breaks down the surplus. And so for a couple things. One is obviously the new investment in tangible capital assets has increased significantly. That's note 11. Sorry. I'll wait till Dan catches up here. There we go. And so then under reserves, so I know that there was a report from the treasurer, city treasurer, on the surplus of just over $800,000 for the year. That has gone into the infrastructure reserve. And again, the infrastructure reserve is used as capital projects are completed. And it really is a point in time, but the majority of that increase in reserves is in that infrastructure reserve. The reserve funds set aside relate to the increase there is water, wastewater. So that's not dependent on your tax rate. That's the water rates and the sewer rates that are anything that's any surplus there is self-contained within those systems. And we've moved it over to those reserve funds. So that's the increase on the reserve fund side. Coming down to the total reserve and the reserve funds, the combination of those two items. At the back of these statements are two schedules. One is the breakdown of the tangible capital assets by component. So again, as you can imagine, of the 834 million of capital assets, 500 million are in water, wastewater, and roads. So that would make sense in your services. And then the back schedule, the very last schedule, is the breakdown of your revenues and expenditures by function. This is a segue between this financial statement that you're looking at now and the FIR that gets filed. Everything on the FIR is on those same functions.
Can you tell me what FIR?
Sorry, financial information returns. So Ministry of Municipal Affairs has you file, it's getting bigger and bigger. It's about a 40-page document that gets filled out with a lot of numbers and all different, but it's all done by these same functions. In your package is also the trust fund financial statement, which I don't think it's going to come up here, but that's fine. There's not a lot I have to say about it. So that trust funds for the city are two different trust funds. One is at the library where you have donations that have been left to be specifically spent on a specific area. And that's the Wren family that left that, I believe. And the other one is in the Valley View home. There is what we call pocket money, PIN money, that the residents are able to spend on personal needs. And we look at that fund and make sure that the amounts being withdrawn are approved by the various residents or their guardians. And there was a decrease this year because two residents who had significant balances passed away or their estates were settled. So that's really the decrease there. And the last thing I have to say is thank you to the city treasurer and his staff. It's been quite a year. You've had a lot of capital. You've had a lot of special projects that needed a lot of different audit reports this year, as well as just getting the asset retirement obligations set up and getting that quantified. So just want to thank your staff. They've done an excellent job.
Thank you. Questions or comments? Councillor Peters.
Thanks, Your Worship. Christine, as we move forward, the accelerator is still going to be pushed down on capital investments and other significant investments. Any advice for us going forward of pitfalls that we may encounter or things that you'd like to see us be doing, perhaps anything different?
I think the main thing would just, through you, Mayor, is just to keep building up your reserve funds, because obviously government funding is not what it used to be, especially in the area of water, wastewater, and those projects are significant in costs. And I'm talking about the current servicing that you have in place. And I'll also remind you that the tangible capital assets are on historical basis. And so as we replace those assets, the cost to replace them is significantly higher, obviously, than they were maybe 40 years ago. And so just keep building your reserves. That's what I'm telling everyone right now, because the funding just isn't there for a lot of those day-to-day projects.
Further questions or comments? Seeing none.
Your Worship, at this time, I have a motion that report TR 1624 relating to the 2023 audited consolidated financial statements be received for information, and further, the council approve the draft consolidated financial statements for the year ended December 31st, 2023, and further, the council approve the draft financial statement for the City of St. Thomas Trust Funds for the year ended December 31st, 2023, and further, the council authorize the mayor to sign the audit findings letter on behalf of city council members. And further, the council approve moving the 2023 surplus amount of $885,773 to the infrastructure reserve. Moved by Councillor Kohler, seconded by Councillor Clark.
Questions or comments on that? Councillor Herbert?
Thank you, Worship. The surplus that we've got, I see it's recommended to go to the infrastructure reserve. Would there be other places we might want to entertain that, or what, that's the group thought?
Well, I can only speak for myself, not for the whole group, but I tend to trust my treasurer when he says this is the right place to put it.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Further questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? Carried.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item relates to Committee of Adjustment Review and Recommendations. I have a motion that report CMO 1824 relating to Committee of Adjustment Review and Recommendations be received for information, and further that bylaw 57-83, being a bylaw to create a Committee of Adjustment, be amended to include the addition of 2 members of council as members of the Committee of Adjustment, and further that 2 members of council be appointed to the Committee of Adjustment when the 2025 committee and council appointments listing is presented to council for its consideration. And further, that forthcoming council agendas include notification of Committee of Adjustment decisions. And further, that the Committee of Adjustment be delegated responsibility to hear property standards bylaw appeals starting at the beginning of the next term of council. Moved by Councillor Wookey, second by Councillor Gibson.
Questions or comments on the report? City Manager, a brief overview of the report?
Through you, Your Worship, the report is just has a look at the current structure of Committee of Adjustment, and it came out of a discussion that we had here at Council, actually a couple of discussions. The report walks through the current status, which is Committee of Adjustment is comprised of 3 citizens, and it hears matters related to minor variances and consent applications. The report recommends that 2 councillors be added to Committee of Adjustment, and how council wants to appoint those could be determined when the committee appointments are made later this year. And I think the intent of that is to provide a little more oversight, a little more connection between council and Committee of Adjustment, so that council is more aware of what's happening in Committee of Adjustment, but also so that the Committee of Adjustment can hear the opinions that might arise at this table regarding the matters that are before them. So in discussion with the clerk, we also chatted about the Property Standards Committee, which meets very infrequently. And so rather than having to have a committee formed and trained every year, just using Committee of Adjustment to hear those very rare property standards appeals made sense from an efficiency point of view. So that's the basis of the report, Your Worship. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Herbert?
Thank you, Worship. Well, is this broken the way it is now? Are we trying to fix a system that has been working for years? My thought if we put a couple of council members on it, would there conflict happen between the 2 different groups now? Or would there be just a smooth transition of giving our thoughts and then having it presented to council? Don't know. I just wondered, is it something that is broken, or is this a better system to have 2 on the council?
City Manager?
Through you, Your Worship, it's not unusual to have councillors appointed to a Committee of Adjustment. They are decisions that impact the municipality, though there are decisions around on how municipal land use planning happens in our municipality. So having elected officials sitting on there, a minority of elected officials is considered to be best management. A lot of municipalities do have that. So in terms of whether it's broken or not, I don't think the current system is broken, but it definitely could be. I think there's room for improvement. Just some of the conversations that have happened at this table recently about the business flowing through the Committee of Adjustment. How does council get its position known to Committee of Adjustment? And how does council get notified of Committee of Adjustment pending and accomplished decisions? So those are areas for improvement. I think the reports address that.
Go ahead, Councillor Herbert.
Through the Worship. The people who are on this committee, is there a job description? Is there a requirement they have some certain background to be part of this committee? Or is it we just advertise and 3 people say, yes, I'll be on it, and we move forward? I don't know how it all works.
Madam Clerk?
Thank you, Your Worship. We do have what we call position descriptions for a lot of the committees to let individuals that may be applying know what is required, timeframes, what some of the topics are. So we do have that, but it's at the call of council who to appoint. Some people do have more experience than others in a particular area, but there is no specific requirement.
Councillor Peters.
Thanks, Your Worship. As a proponent for some change, I just want to say thanks to Michael and all the staff that were involved in this. I think this is a good step forward to, I think, help bridge the decision-making of Committee of Adjustment. And when that decision comes to City Council, I really believe that having a couple councillors sitting at that table are going to improve the decision-making process from the other end. So thanks to staff.
Further questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried.
Next item relates to city clerks and airport fees bylaw updates. I have a motion that report CC 0624 relating to city clerks and airport fees bylaw updates be received for information. And further, council authorize the preparation of bylaw amendments for fees bylaws numbered 180-2002 and 179-2002. Moved by Councillor Wookey, seconded by Councillor Gibson.
Questions or comments? Councillor McCauley.
These all make sense to me, but I did have a question specifically about Committee of Adjustment consent to sever application fee. It's gone from $450 to $2,000, and that increase is significant in comparison to the others. And I'm just wondering if you can provide some background on that.
Your Worship, would it be all right if our Deputy City Clerk who wrote the report answered that question?
Would be more than all right.
Thanks, Your Worship, and through to Councillor McCauley. So we were looking at the Committee of Adjustment fees for more of a cost recovery for the staff time, both planning staff, clerk staff. The cost of advertising has gone up and all of our requirements. So it is a bit of a jump. It hasn't been reviewed in about 20 years. So it's been the current rate for quite some time.
Councillor Gibson? Yes, go ahead.
Before John sits, thank you, Your Worship. I'm also seeing that jump in the variance as well for the application fee, so I'm assuming it's also geared to your costs.
Yeah, that's correct. So just a quick example, the newspaper advertising runs about $400. The committee members themselves are $200. That doesn't include any of the staff time to actually process the applications and do the administrative work.
Councillor Peters?
Thanks, Your Worship. The previous council had dealt with a large delegation of airport users concerned about different things at the airport. We were sort of looking at the issue, and then COVID came along and we just have nothing proceeded any further. Does the clerk or the deputy clerk anticipate any pushback from any of the airport users on these proposed changes?
Okay, it's an option. Who gets it?
Your Worship, I think I'll answer that. I don't think there's any changes to the fees or much of anything, maybe relating to snow blowing or grass cutting. There's no big changes to the fees other than change in the consumer price index at this time. We are expecting at some point in the future with facilities to come back with a report to move in a direction as to whether to spend capital funds, not to spend capital funds, to demolish, to fix up, to replace. At this time, the costs for replacement are rather prohibitive, so we're not putting that in the 2025 budget.
Further questions? Councillor Herbert?
Thank you, Worship. So the way I'm reading this, we have proposed airport fees, which is dictated by the airport. And then we have proposed city clerk's fees, which is proposed by the city. Is that the way I'm reading it? Or are they the two, are they both basically the same?
Go ahead.
Yeah, so the airport's a division of the city clerk's department, but they do have two separate bylaws. So the clerk's fees are listed in one bylaw and the airport fees are listed in another. So we just did the report in one to revise both sets of fees.
Okay.
Good. Further questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Carried.
Next item relates to the 2024 Municipal Accessibility Plan. I have a motion that report CC 0524 relating to the 2024 Municipal Accessibility Plan be received for information, and further, council receive and approve the 2024 Accessibility Plan as attached to report CC 0524. Moved by Councillor Kohler, seconded by Councillor Gibson.
Questions or comments? Councillor Gibson.
I would just like to thank staff for putting this package together for everyone to see. I was glad to see a few items that were listed that I was not familiarized with, so I appreciate the package. Thank you.
Further questions or comments on the accessibility plan? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Carried.
Your worship, unless there are any further items from members, that concludes the business of Committee of the Whole. Council will now reconvene in, sorry.
Councillor Clark.
Sorry, Your Worship. I hope this is the right place under corporate governance. Last week, council chose to defer a report regarding the the application to the Community Sport and Recreation Infrastructure Fund for pickleball courts. And the minutes don't provide any direction to staff. And so I'm just wondering, my worry is that the stream of funds that are available will dry up because it mentions that there's a pocket of money and applications will be received, and as the money is used up, it's gone. And so I'm just wondering whether it's from the members or whether it's from the city manager, when this might be dealt with again in the future so that we can avail ourselves of in my eyes, free money that would provide us recreation opportunities in the city.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. I'll take that one. We don't want to leave any money on the table ever. I wrote a bit of a note to the members of the committee that were responsible for the rec center to remind them of what the obligations are this council has said. I spoke with Director Bray, and he has given us a pretty good update on where we're heading on the Parks and Rec Master Plan. I expect that deferral to come back to council on the first meeting in November.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Your worship, if there's no further items, I have a motion that the recommendations, directions, and actions of council and committee of the whole, as recorded in the minutes of this date, be confirmed, ratified, and adopted.
Questions or?
Sorry, moved by Councillor Wookey, just seconded by Councillor Herbert.
Forgot to get a mover and seconder first. Questions or comments on it? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Carried.
No reports of committees this evening. We'll now move into petitions and communications. First is a request for electric vehicle charging credits in road construction areas. We've received a letter from Bradley Clift of 67 Elysian Street, specifically in areas affected by a road construction project.
If I can just speak to that one pretty quickly, I've spoken with Bradley and I'd like to ensure that we're putting his thoughts into our future construction work. We have a construction manager that deals with households where anywhere where we're doing construction. And this is another one we'll need to think of in the future, is someone will have to charge their vehicle, and it's if they're blocked off by a curb pouring for a day or two, how will we deal with that? But I'm going to refer that back to staff to say, let's make sure we're putting that in now in our construction outlook for each of the construction projects we do that may prevent someone from being able to charge their vehicle, or at least warning to charge your vehicle ahead because tomorrow your curb's going to be blocked off and you may not be able to get in your driveway. So I'll leave that for staff and then get back to us if there's something that's in the way of doing what we just said. Councillor Peters?
Will staff then reply to Mr. Cliff's correspondence, or that it's the direction of council that those things be taken into consideration in future. I just don't want to leave the gentleman sort of hanging either.
Right.
So that we can provide some clarity.
Mr. Dealbeck, have we, or?
Yeah, so we'll get back to the resident and let him know what his options were because this has now occurred. But to your point, Mayor Preston, there are already provisions in our contract documents that allow for two-stage driveway construction if access to someone's driveway is required. We normally do that for industrial, commercial type of entrances, but we also do it for residents that have personal care needs or high accessibility needs. So if there's an issue, we can work with the residents to make this happen already. So it's a consideration we are already contemplating through our contract documents.
Great.
Oh, and sorry, we do also put door hangers on everybody's to let them know if they do or will not have access because of the concrete pouring piece of it. The rest of the time, access to a resident's driveway is to be maintained by the contractor. If it can't be, we work with the resident to find an alternative parking arrangement. But I understand, you know, this is their gas station is at home. So there are provisions currently that will help facilitate that. And we're happy to work with the residents or any future EV owner residents.
Okay, great. Thank you, Madam Clerk.
Next item, we've received a letter from the Good Roads Board of Directors regarding the Rural Road Safety Program. And that concludes the items that are currently under petitions. Next order of business, Your Worship, is unfinished business. If any of
Councillor Herbert.
Thank you, Worship. A few weeks ago, we had an update from Jeff Bray about the animal shelter. We won't have a meeting for a couple of weeks now, so I wonder if there's a further update on the animal shelter. And I see Jeff is on the call, so.
Let's see if he's joining us to give us there you are, Mr. Bray. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Preston. Through you to Councillor Herbert. We did a pre-qualification for contractors that has closed. We will be actually finalizing that tomorrow morning. The successful proponents will receive a tender package this week. It'll close and be awarded by the end of the year we're looking at a spring construction start date.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else under unfinished business? Under new business, a couple of items, and I wanted to thank Mr. Bray and his wife for being out at the puppy parade on Saturday at Pinafore Park, along with hundreds of citizens of our town and their pets. We had, of course, 3 puppies out there. Or only one would stay in her costume, the other 2 would not. But it was a great puppy parade throughout Pinafore Park, and you really enjoy Pinafore Park in our community when you see it on a day like we had this fall, how beautiful it's been out there. So thank you to all who joined the puppy parade, and it was a fundraiser for the animal shelter. So I thank all that came and contributed. Another piece of news that you cannot miss is Pumpkin Prowl this Friday night from 5 to 8 on Talbot Street. And if you drive down Talbot Street today, you see bright orange pumpkins in many of the businesses' window, and by Friday you'll see them in every business's windows, which means they're participating in Pumpkin Prowl. Safe Halloween trick-or-treating piece for kids. We will also be on the front steps of City Hall doing it also, and there is a passport book for you to be to gain stamps for. The more places you visit, the more likely you are to win something on the passport. Another great event by the Downtown Development Board, and really looking forward to seeing all the kids in costume on Friday night. And anybody who else, and adults in costume too, if you'd like to come. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Councillor Herbert.
Thank you. Just commenting on the Pumpkin Fest from last year. Congratulations to all the merchants who took part. I've never seen so many people on Talbot Street as I saw last year. It was just bumper to bumper with kids.
Yeah,
They're
not
all
here
over the
yet.
streets. So I hope it'll happen again this year. So anyway, just a good comment for the merchants who all get involved with it. Thanks.
Further events or other new business? Seeing none.
Your worship, will now move into bylaws. I have a motion that leave be granted to bring in the bylaws. Moved by Councillor Wookie, seconded by Councillor Baldwin Sands.
Questions or questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? Carried.
I have a motion by Councillor Wookie, seconded by Councillor Baldwin Sands, that the bylaws be now read a first time, referred to council and committee of the whole, and read a second time.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Carried.
First bylaw, please.
First bylaw is a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the council meeting held on October 21st, 2024.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Next bylaw.
Second bylaw is a bylaw to repeal bylaw 145-92, being a bylaw to designate 77 Metcalf Street in the city of St. Thomas as a building of historic and architectural value.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Third bylaw.
Third bylaw is a bylaw to amend bylaw 50-88, being the zoning bylaw for the city of St. Thomas. This is to permit a new semi-detached lot at 134 to 136 Manor Road.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Next bylaw, please.
Fourth bylaw is a bylaw to adopt amendment number 111 to the City of St. Thomas official plan. This relates to new residential subdivision at 41041 Major Line.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Next bylaw.
Next bylaw is a bylaw to amend bylaw 50-88, being the zoning bylaw for the City of St. Thomas. Again, this relates to the new residential subdivision at 41041 Major Line.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Next bylaw, please.
Sixth bylaw is a bylaw to adopt amendment number 112 in the City of St. Thomas to the official plan to permit a residential subdivision at 9783 Wellington Road.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Seventh and final bylaw, please.
Seventh bylaw is a bylaw to amend bylaw 50-88, being the zoning bylaw for the City of St. Thomas to permit new residential subdivision at 9783 Wellington Road.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Your worship, I rise to report successful passing the 7 bylaws.
Great work.
I have a motion by Councillor Wookie, seconded by Councillor Baldwin Sands, that the report of council and committee of the whole on the 7 bylaws be received and adopted. The same be read a third time, engrossed, signed by the mayor and clerk, sealed and numbered.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Carried.
We have some notices under public notice. The first one is that council will consider a bylaw to close a portion of Edgeware Line at its meeting to be held on November the 4th at 5 p.m. And also to consider a bylaw to close a portion of South Edgeware Road at the same meeting to be held at 5 p.m. on November the 4th, 2024. Next notice is that council will consider a bylaw to amend fees with respect to clerks and St. Thomas Airport charges at its meeting on November the 4th at 5 p.m. Next item relates to the 2025 sewage service rates. Notice is hereby provided that a public meeting will be held on November the 4th at 6 o'clock relating to the proposed 2025 sewage service rates, and also that that administration intends to introduce a report and the bylaw at the November 12th, 2024 council meeting relating to the sewage service rates. The last one relates to the 2025 water rates, fees, and charges. First item, notice regarding a public meeting to be held on November 4th at 6 p.m. regarding the proposed 2025 water rates, fees, and charges. And then also that administration intends to introduce a report and bylaw at the November 12th, 2024 council meeting relating to the proposed 2025 water rates, fees, and charges. No notices of motion, Your Worship. At this time, there is a need to move into closed session. I have a motion that this meeting be closed to deal with a position, plan, procedure, criteria, or instruction to be applied to any negotiations carried on or to be carried on by or on behalf of the municipality, two personal matters about identifiable individuals, and a labor relations matter. Just looking for a mover, and is that moved by Counselor Baldwin Sands, seconded by Counselor Clark?
Thank you very much, and I'll call for questions or comments in a second, but just as we normally do, we'll now be moving into closed session for those watching on stream at home. And when we are finished with our closed session, we'll come out of closed session back to open session in order to adjourn and go home, but no further business will be done at that time. Sort of. I don't think there is today. There may be a little. But thank you all for joining us tonight. Questions or comments from the council? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? We are in closed session.
Bingo.
Your worship, at this time, I have a motion that council rise from closed session. Moved by Counselor Peters, seconded by Counselor Gibson.
Questions or comments about rising? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? Carried.
Your worship, we have one further item under open session that's relating to committee appointment. I have a motion that council appoint Wilfred Riker to the Committee of Adjustment for the remainder of the council term, subject to policy HR 2309 and the required accessibility training. Moved by Counselor McCauley.
Second.
Seconded by Counselor Herbert.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? Carried. One more item.
This time I have a motion for adjournment. Moved by Counselor Gibson, seconded by Counselor Wookey.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? That carried. Thank you very much.